Welcome to the Colosseum's underbelly, where brutality reigned supreme. Forget what you think you know about gladiators. The punishments they faced were so barbaric, they'll make your skin crawl. Starting off strong, we are talking about death inside of the arena. In the bloody and brutal world of ancient Rome's gladiator games, the most frequent and expected outcome for a fighter was a gruesome death right in the middle of the arena. Picture a defeated gladiator standing in the sand, his fate hanging on the whims of the crowd and the game's sponsor, known as the editor. If the crowd didn't show their thumbs up or the editor decided it wasn't the gladiator's lucky day, there would be no mercy. No missio for the fallen warrior. Instead, he had to brace himself, show some serious guts, and face death without flinching. Enter the finisher, a designated gladiator whose grim job was to deliver the final blow, using a sword or a mace to end the loser's misery. This stark and fatal end was the dark reality for many gladiators, a chilling reminder of the life and death stakes of ancient entertainment. Next, we are talking about no mercy fights. In ancient Rome, some gladiator matches were known as no mercy fights. In these brutal showdowns, the idea of surrender wasn't even on the table. Fighters had to battle it out until one of them bit the dust. This rule turned the arena into a particularly merciless place where the only way out was victory or death. Crowds loved these ruthless battles as they were guaranteed the drama of a fight to the death, making these matches a grim but popular spectacle. Imagine the intense pressure on the gladiators knowing that there was absolutely no chance of mercy. Every clash could be their last. Absolutely terrifying. Gives me goosebumps just thinking about it. Ugh. Next, we are talking about the punishment of humiliation. In the brutal world of ancient Rome, gladiators who didn't meet the mark in the arena were in for more than just a loss. They actually faced public embarrassment in front of thousands. If a gladiator showed any hint of fear or fought poorly, they weren't just defeated, they were now humiliated. A once fearsome warrior now being whipped in front of a roaring crowd or forced to parade around with a wooden sword, the rudis. This wasn't a simple prop, it was a symbol of their failure and disgrace, a sign that they'd fallen from warrior to a source of entertainment for the bloodthirsty spectators. This harsh treatment served as a stern warning to other gladiators. In the arena, courage and skill were the only paths to survival and respect. Next, we are talking about slave labor. So in ancient Rome, if a gladiator managed to survive the brutal combat of the arena, but didn't really impress the crowd or their sponsor enough, they could escape immediate death only to face a fate some considered even worse: slave labor. These unlucky souls were often sold into slavery or shipped off to labor in mines and quarries under incredibly harsh conditions. Imagine working long hours in sweltering heat with barely any food or water and the ever-present threat of deadly accidents. For many gladiators, this was a slow, grueling march towards death, making their earlier battles in the arena seem almost merciful in comparison. This grim outcome was a reminder that in the world of Roman gladiators, mercy could be just as cruel as the sword. Next, we are talking about Fustuarium. The Fustuarium was a brutal form of punishment that wasn't just limited to the Roman military. Yeah, gladiators could also fall victim to this horrible fate. So picture this. A gladiator decides that he's had enough and he tries to escape or flat out refuses to fight. His punishment would be being harmed to death with heavy clubs. This wasn't just a quick and merciful end, but a drawn out spectacle of cruelty meant to serve as a warning to any other gladiator thinking about stepping out of line. It's definitely a reminder for us of how unforgiving and harsh the life of a gladiator could be. There were no second chances in the arena. If the battles didn't get you, your own decision to flee just might. Next, we are heading over to Damnatio ad Bestias. In ancient Rome, if you were a gladiator on the wrong side of luck, you might find yourself thrown into the arena as a bestiary, facing off against wild, ferocious animals without a single weapon to defend yourself. This was known as Damnatio ad Bestias, a brutal form of execution that entertained the crowds but meant almost certain death for the condemned. Imagine Imagine standing there, weaponless, as lions, bears, or even tigers were released to ensure a gruesome end. The Romans definitely loved the drama and cheered from the stands, treating it as prime entertainment, while the gladiator had no choice but to face their fanged opponents in a desperate dance of survival. This definitely wasn't just a punishment, it was a public spectacle designed to both awe and terrify. Definitely did the terrifying part, that's for sure. Next we are talking about military service. Sometimes gladiators who didn't quite make the cut in the arena got what might look like a second chance. They were scooped up and thrown into the Roman military. Now, this wasn't just like a shiny, sword-swinging centurion. We're talking about the grunt roles, filled with all of the tasks nobody else wanted to do. Think charging first into battle, or facing the fiercest enemies, or holding down the most treacherous posts. It's like going from the frying pan straight into the fire. While it sounds like a step up from facing death in the arena, the reality was these positions were so risky that survival wasn't much more likely. So this opportunity was often just another way to meet a grim end, wrapping up in what some might call an honor of serving Rome. It's pretty clear that for most of these guys, whether in the arena or the army, the odds were never in their favor. That's a Hunger Games reference, I guess. Next we are talking about prison. Imagine being a gladiator. We're doing a lot of imagining today. Imagine being a gladiator in ancient Rome, stuck in a dim, dark prison while waiting to face your fate in the arena. These weren't the spacious prisons you see in movies, they were cramped, dark spaces crowded with other unlucky souls. The food? Well, if you could call it that, it was barely enough to keep you alive, often leading to malnutrition. Disease ran rampant, passed from one weakened body to another with no hope of medical care. And the guards, well, they were brutal, dishing out beatings and abuse just to keep you in line. In these cells, gladiators awaited their turn to fight for survival, not knowing if they'd step out into the sunlight again or if they'd be dragged out too weak to even hold a sword. It was a grim countdown to a brutal spectacle, with every moment in those cells a test of endurance and spirit. Next we are talking about branding. In ancient Rome, if you were a gladiator and you messed up, you definitely didn't just get a slap on the wrist, you might end up with a permanent mark of shame literally branded right onto your face or forehead. Imagine having the letters FVG, short for fugitivus, which means escapee, burned into your skin for everyone to see, just because you tried to run away from a fight. Or maybe you showed a little too much fear or didn't follow orders properly. Well, that could earn you another kind of mark, telling the whole world about your cowardice or disobedience. This branding wasn't just about punishment, it was a way to humiliate you and mark you out as a troublemaker for the rest of your life. Talk about tough love, Roman style. And finally on our list today we are talking about social death. Surviving the arena didn't mean that a gladiator could just go right back to normal life, it was actually quite the opposite. These fighters were seen as the bottom of the social ladder, stripped of any honor or respect that they might have had before. Imagine being like a famous athlete today, but instead of fans asking for autographs, people crossed the street to avoid you. That was the life of a gladiator who lived through his battles. They were denied the basic rights that ordinary citizens took for granted, and no matter what they did, they couldn't shake off their past. It was kind of like being tagged with an invisible "do not trust" label that followed them everywhere. This social death was a heavy price to pay, making survival in the arena a bit of a mixed blessing at best. Alright guys, that has been our list for today. Thanks so much for checking it out. I've been your host today, Olivia Kozlowski, and I will see you again soon. Goodbye. So, in ancient Rome, some gladiator matches were known as Sine, Missione. Okay, I'm just gonna call it No Mercy. Like, why am I trying to speak Latin? Okay, it's definitely a what the I'm like still asleep. Next, we are I probably shouldn't clap right as I say that.